Have you ever felt like your mind is working against you? Like you're trying to focus on something important, but your thoughts keep wandering to that embarrassing thing you said 3 years ago? Or maybe you've set ambitious goals only to find yourself scrolling mindlessly through social media instead? If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Our minds can sometimes feel like they have a mind of their own. But what if we could actually take control? What if we could master our own minds instead of letting them master us? That's exactly what I decided to find out. For 1 full week, I committed to the challenge of mastering my own mind, documenting every technique, every struggle, and every breakthrough along the way. The results were nothing short of transformative, and today I'm sharing everything I learned with you. Before we dive in, let me clarify what I mean by mastering the mind. I'm not talking about some mystical ability to bend spoons with your thoughts or read other people's minds. I'm talking about something far more practical yet equally powerful: the ability to direct your attention, manage your emotions, and choose your thoughts rather than being at their mercy. It's about becoming the driver of your mental experience, rather than a passenger being taken for a ride. The truth is, most of us live in a state of mental autopilot. Research from Harvard University found that people spend about 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're currently doing. That's nearly half our lives spent mentally elsewhere. And this mind wandering doesn't make us happier, quite the opposite. The same research found that a wandering mind is typically an unhappy mind. So why is it so hard to stay present and focused? Well, our brains evolved in an environment where constant vigilance was necessary for survival. Being alert to potential threats and opportunities was advantageous. But in today's world, this same tendency manifests as an addiction to novelty, a resistance to boredom, and difficulty sustaining attention on a single task. Add to this the unprecedented level of distraction we face from technology, and you have a perfect storm for mental chaos. Day 1 of my challenge began with a sobering realization. I had no idea how much my mind controlled me until I tried to control it. I set a simple goal: to meditate for 20 minutes without getting lost in thought. Sounds easy, right? Within 30 seconds, I was planning dinner. After redirecting my attention back to my breath, I immediately started worrying about an upcoming deadline. This pattern continued for the entire session, leaving me frustrated but determined. For day 2, I decided to implement a technique called thought labeling. Each time a thought arose during meditation, I would simply label it: planning, worrying, remembering, and then return to my breath. This created a small but crucial space between me and my thoughts. I wasn't eliminating them, which is impossible and not even desirable, but I was changing my relationship with them. Instead of being swept away by every thought, I was observing them from a distance. By day 3, I was ready to take this practice beyond meditation and into daily life. I set hourly reminders on my phone to check in with myself. Where is my attention right now? Am I choosing where to direct it, or is it being pulled away? This simple awareness practice revealed something startling. I was spending enormous amounts of mental energy on things that didn't matter or that I couldn't control. For instance, I caught myself ruminating about a slightly awkward interaction with a colleague for over an hour. An hour of mental energy that could have been directed towards something meaningful or productive. Once I noticed this pattern, I could implement what psychologists call cognitive defusion, the practice of separating yourself from your thoughts rather than being fused with them. Instead of thinking, "I'm so awkward," which identifies me with the thought, I would notice, "I'm having the thought that I'm awkward." This subtle shift makes all the difference. The thought becomes something I'm experiencing rather than something I am. Day 4 brought a new challenge: emotional regulation. Our thoughts and emotions are intimately connected, each influencing the other in a continuous feedback loop. When we're anxious, we tend to think anxious thoughts, which makes us more anxious, and so on. Breaking this cycle requires addressing both components. I experimented with a technique from acceptance and commitment therapy called expansion. When a difficult emotion arose, instead of trying to suppress it or distract myself from it, which research shows only amplifies it later, I would mentally make room for it. I'd notice where in my body I felt the emotion, observe its qualities without judgment, and allow it to be there while continuing with whatever I was doing. This was particularly powerful when I received some critical feedback on a project. Instead of spiraling into defensiveness or self-doubt, I noticed the sensations of disappointment in my chest, acknowledged them, and then asked myself, what's the most effective way to respond to this feedback? Rather than being controlled by my emotional reaction, I was able to choose a response aligned with my values. By day 5, I was starting to notice significant changes. My mind still wandered, I still had negative thoughts, and I still experienced difficult emotions, but I was no longer at their mercy. There was a space, however small, between stimulus and response, where I could exercise choice. And in that space, as Viktor Frankl famously said, lies our growth and our freedom. I also began implementing what neuroscientists call attention training. Our attention, like a muscle, can be strengthened through deliberate practice. I would set a timer for increasingly longer periods, starting with just 5 minutes, during which I would focus exclusively on one task. No multitasking, no checking notifications, no mental planning of other activities. At first, this was excruciating. My brain craved the dopamine hit of novelty and distraction, but gradually, my concentration improved. By day 6, I could work for 25 minutes straight without my attention fragmenting. A small victory, but one with enormous implications for productivity and mental well-being. The final day of my challenge was perhaps the most profound. I decided to practice what Buddhist tradition calls loving-kindness meditation, directing well wishes toward myself and others. This might sound a bit woo-woo, but the science behind it is solid. Regular practice of loving-kindness meditation has been shown to increase positive emotions, decrease negative emotions, and even reduce chronic pain. What struck me most was how this practice affected my interactions with others. When someone cut me off in traffic, instead of the automatic reaction of anger, I found myself wondering what might be happening in their life to make them drive so recklessly. Was there an emergency? Were they having a terrible day? This shift from judgment to curiosity and compassion wasn't forced. It arose naturally from the week's practice of mental mastery. So what did I learn from this week-long experiment? First and foremost, that mastering your mind is not about achieving some perfect state of calm or eliminating negative thoughts. It's about developing the awareness to recognize when your mind is pulling you in directions you don't want to go and the skills to gently redirect it. Second, that this mastery is a practice, not a destination. Even experienced meditators who've been practicing for decades still have wandering minds and difficult emotions. The difference is in how quickly they notice and how skillfully they respond. Third, that small, consistent efforts compound over time. Each time you notice your attention has wandered and bring it back, you're strengthening neural pathways that make it easier to stay focused in the future. Each time you create space between a difficult emotion and your response to it, you're building emotional resilience. And finally, that mastering your mind is not just about personal well-being, it's about how you show up in the world. When we're not constantly hijacked by our thoughts and emotions, we can be more present with others, more aligned with our values, and more effective in our actions. The techniques I've shared, meditation, thought labeling, cognitive defusion, emotional expansion, attention training, and loving-kindness practice, are just a few of the many tools available for mental mastery. What matters is finding what works for you and committing to regular practice. As with any skill, progress isn't linear. There will be days when your mind feels like a wild horse that can't be tamed. That's normal. The key is to approach the practice with curiosity rather than judgment, with persistence rather than perfectionism. I want to emphasize that serious mental health conditions require professional support, and these practices are complements to, not replacements for, appropriate treatment. But for the everyday challenges of being human in a complex world, developing these skills can be transformative. So, can we truly master our minds? Based on my experience, I'd say yes, but with an important caveat. Mastery doesn't mean control in the sense of domination or suppression. It means skillful relationship. It means dancing with your mind rather than wrestling with it. The mind is an incredibly powerful tool, but like any tool, its value depends on how we use it. When left to its own devices, it can become a source of suffering, ruminating on the past, worrying about the future, comparing ourselves to others, and creating narratives that limit our potential. But when we learn to direct it with awareness and intention, it becomes an ally in creating a life of meaning, connection, and purpose. My week-long challenge was just the beginning of what I hope will be a lifelong journey of mental mastery. I've experienced enough to know that the quality of our lives is largely determined by the quality of our minds, and that this is something we have far more influence over than we might think. I'd love to hear about your experiences with mastering your mind. What techniques have worked for you? What challenges have you faced? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, consider checking out my other video on how to build unshakable mental resilience in just 10 minutes a day. Remember, the mind is a wonderful servant but a terrible master. The choice of which role it plays in your life is ultimately yours to make. Choose wisely and watch as your experience of life transforms from the inside out.